Hi everyone, I'm assuming you can hear me okay? Oh, the silence is reassuring. Peter, are we all good at the back? Can I just check with everyone on Zoom, welcome, and can you hear us okay? If someone could put in the chat yes or no, that would be fantastic. We're good, brilliant. Always a relief when that happens. Some of you might have been here when we had a big disaster, so that was quite funny a couple of times, but luckily we're more professional today. So, welcome to the St. Bride Foundation. If you don't know who I am, I'm Becky, and you're very lucky because you've never heard one of my introductions before. If you've heard them before, I'm very sorry in advance for the repeated waffle, but I'm hoping that you've come to know and love it as part of the St. Bride experience. Hooray, indeed. So welcome to everyone in the room, welcome to everyone on Zoom. It's really lovely to have you all here today for the annual Beatrice Warde Memorial Lecture. Today would not be possible without the generosity of our fantastic sponsors. They're all independent type foundries. So I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Commercial Type, Just Another Foundry, Type Together and Our Typography. I feel like they deserve a big round of applause because we wouldn't be here without them. Thank you for indulging me with that. You will find on your seats some fantastic specimens from a couple of these foundries. Please do check them out, go and use them online. They're absolutely fantastic people, as well as all the other fantastic foundries out there as well. So, as we are live streaming today, please do bear with us if we have any technical difficulties. If this does happen, we will try to rectify it as soon as possible. For anyone on Zoom, if you are experiencing technical difficulties yourself, the good old trick of logging in and out again or turning your computer on and off again really does do the trick. We have verified with this with a few of our regular attendees. If for any reason you can't actually get the lecture to work, something happens, your power goes out, please don't worry. We are recording this lecture and the recording will be sent to everyone online and in person to watch after the event. So we hopefully are covered in all eventualities. So can I just ask our Zoom attendees to please make sure that they're all muted? And for anyone in person, you are allowed to take photographs, but please don't use your flash because it's really distracting to the speaker. I now have to do my fantastic fire alarm spiel, so you're prepared in any eventuality. If there is a fire, there will be one continuous alarm bell. The meeting place is through reception and we'll meet out in the courtyard that way. If the fire happens to be in reception and that way is blocked, we will direct you down the second set of staircases out there, past the theatre bar and out onto the street and meet up round by there. So hopefully nothing will happen, but if you are, you know what you're doing. What else have I got to say? Oh, okay. So I'm now doing my usual plug for all the fantastic events coming up. We have a ridiculous embarrassment of riches coming up over the next few months, and this is just a highlight. So please do go on our website for more brilliant things we've got coming up in 2024. I feel like it's just a little bit too soon to be talking about next year when we haven't even got to like Bonfire Night or Halloween yet. So bear with me. We've got some fantastic talks coming up. And iMagazine are doing their brilliant thing with Type Tuesday next week. And the fantastic Rick Poyner is celebrating his new book launch of Why Culture Matters. So please do come along to that. It's going to be a fantastic event as always. There'll be a Q&A, lots of brilliant things, and lots of back issues of iMagazine to buy. And then the next iMagazine Type Tuesday, which isn't currently on our website, so do hold the date in your diary because the absolutely fantastic Joby Carter will be speaking on the 28th of November. Cannot recommend it enough. I have wanted to hear him talk for ages, so please do come along to this as well. It's just going to be an actual visual feast for the eyes. So hopefully you'd like to come to that. On the 11th of November, we have our first annual conference, which is back after a 12-year hiatus. The theme is Innovation, Inspiration, Imagination and Invention, and we have these fantastic speakers talking at the event. Some of them you may have heard of, some of them you won't, but it's going to be an absolutely brilliant, inspiring day. You'll get to meet them, chat with them, and we've even got a cheesy disco at the end for those who are into that kind of thing. It's going to be brilliant fun. It'll be in this hall. It's going to be great. And cheesy, I think, is the right word. So our DJ is at the back and can take requests. And then finally, our last event of 23, yes, is The Hyphen is a Dagger, which is a celebration of letterpress printers and poets in collaboration. It's with Pat Randall and a couple of other people who I'm very sorry I forgot their names, but they're brilliant people, and it's going to be a really lovely event about a really beautiful publication that they're working on and collaborating on together from scratch. So I'm really excited about that one as well. And I've gone completely off-piste from my notes, so bear with me. So if you weren't aware, I'm sure most of you are, so I'm talking to the converted, but this building holds a fantastic collection called the St. Bride Library. So you can come and use our library, and every Wednesday our reading room is open. We do tours, we do workshops, we've got a theatre downstairs. There's just so much here, so please do check out other things that we do here. There's just so much on offer. You know, just come and, you know, buy a Christmas present for someone, get them a letterpress course rather than something they don't need to fill up their house. It's a win-win, I think, and then you get some lovely printy, inky goodness in your life. That's all I'm going to say. I could talk for far too long about all of this, so I'm sorry, I'm going to keep it short. And also, talking about the Christmas word, I know it is too soon, but we have these fantastic Christmas cards that have been created specially for us by some of the world's top leading graphic designers, typographers, illustrators, artists, and all the money sold from the cards goes to the St. Bride Foundation. And I mean, who doesn't want a postcard saying baubles on it? I mean, by Zeb Lester, it's brilliant. Please do consider buying them. We're printing them in the next couple of weeks, and then they'll be available to ship at the beginning of November. So, enough about us. If you'd like, well, apart from, this is our website, go and find more details. There we go. So, tonight, our talk will last approximately 60 minutes-ish, and there'll be time for questions afterwards. Oh yeah, and change slide, which I've done already. So, the reason we are all here tonight is to celebrate Beatrice Warde, who is a fantastic legend in the world of typography and design, and St. Bride. She's been an absolute icon to many. And delivering the annual memorial lecture is Ellen Lupton, whose book I have had since I got my first job in publishing, and my boss gave this to me. It's very well loved, very well read, and a brilliant Bible. So I've known Ellen for about 20 years through this book. So, if you didn't know, Ellen is a designer, writer, and educator. She's authored and co-authored numerous books about graphic design, including this fantastic publication, Thinking with Type, which absolutely have to tell you is coming out in a new edition next year with Chronicle Books, so go check it out. Ellen teaches in the Graphic Design MFA program at Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, where she proudly serves as the Betty Cooke and William O. Steinmetz Design Chair. She is Curator Emerita at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum in New York City, where her exhibitions included Herbert Bayer, Bauhaus Master and the Senses, Design Beyond Vision. And Ellen loves reading, writing, teaching, and learning new things about design. And I'm sure we could all say a lot more about her, but I feel like I've done enough now, and I want to hand over to Ellen. So, with further ado, a big round of applause for Ellen, and thank you for listening.
Yes, that's it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So cool to be here. Thank you. That was so beautiful, Becky. And what a great place and a great city. And I love the weather and everything. I do, actually. I think it's as advertised, you know? So my talk is called Writing with Type, and it's kind of a winding journey. So I made a map. And I promise that we won't get lost in the molasses swamp. You're in good hands, and Beatrice Warde, her spirit, will be here to help guide us where we're going. So there's a few chapters. So first we're going to be looking for some metaphors and some values for how to talk about graphic design. And then I'm going to tell a little bit about my journey of learning to read and write about graphic design. And then I'm going to tell you some stories about writers in history that I think are really going to surprise you about their relationship to typography. So some people you know and people you don't know who loved type. And then finally, I'll tell you a little bit about the new edition of Thinking with Type, where everything that I have learned about reading and writing and people and history comes together, and I can't wait to share with you a few pages and stories from the all-new, pixel-new, every page dusted off edition of my favorite book that I made called Thinking with Type. So Beatrice Warde, I have immersed myself in her voice and her pages over the last few weeks. She was an amazing scholar and commentator and promoter of typography. If Beatrice Warde were alive today, she would be huge on TikTok, talking about type and what you should and shouldn't do with it. I have recently become huge on Instagram Reels. I have started creating these little educational videos in the persona of Type Mom. And just like your real mom, Type Mom is very embarrassing and makes cringy jokes. And she loves you so much, and she is warm and sincere. And she talks about problems in typography that are real, problems, little things and confusions that my students, my graduate students, are confused about, things that I'm confused about. And so I brought Type Mom along tonight to punctuate our more serious proceedings with some commentary and lessons. So I want to take temperature of the room. Are you worried about line lengths? Yes, because I'm worried. And when I went to design school, we were told we had to count the number of characters in a line. And if you had too many, you were in big trouble. And if you had not enough, you were in bigger trouble. And this really upset me and almost turned me away from graphic design because I don't like counting stuff. And it was just very intimidating. I never wanted anyone to ask me, like, what is the right number of characters in a line? So Type Mom called the pediatrician to find out the truth. In fact, she called 5 pediatricians, and they all had a different answer, which is so disturbing that the truth should be so malleable. So let's hear what Type Mom has to say about line lengths. I'm worried about line lengths. Long lines are exhausting. Short lines are choppy and spotty and full of holes. But how many characters should fit on a line? Oh no, all these experts say something different. So let's choose the smallest number, 35 characters per line, and the biggest number, 75 characters per line, in case anyone's really counting. My dog counts. He's genius. Okay, so chapter 1, looking for metaphors. Beatrice Warde was very good at metaphors. She compared typography to a house and to a mouse. I recommend this lesser-known work by the great Beatrice Warde. But her most famous metaphor, of course, is the crystal goblet. And many a postmodernist has tried to smash it. I did myself when I was a wee girl. But alas, this metaphor endures and is probably the basis of UX design and human-centered design. It is a brilliant, vivid, and kind metaphor. It's about hospitality and giving and service. It is light, it is delicate, and it is there for us. And it has been beautifully rendered in many historic editions. And I see it as a very wonderful alternative to some of the other ways we talk about type. And in a moment of horrific war and violence, I'd rather have a crystal goblet than 26 lead soldiers. No one knows who really said this. Some people say Gutenberg. I think that's very unlikely. He was just trying to keep his business afloat. He had no idea what was coming with typography. Maybe Benjamin Franklin said it. The American typeface designer Frederick Gowdy did his own edit. I am the leaden army that conquers the world. I am type. This is a parade float from 1928, and these characters are dressed up as toy soldiers, and each one is carrying a big papier-mâché piece of lead type, and at the center of the float is a working print shop. It's pretty cool. And this is Trajan's column. Type history idolizes this column, which was built as a war monument by the Emperor Trajan in the year 113. And the part that we like is at the very bottom of the column. It's this inscription. And these letters are the stuff of legend. They have been revived numerous times over the 2,000-year period of them standing there in the Roman Forum. I highly recommend Paul Shaw's amazing book about all these phases of revival of these letters. This is Frederick Gowdy's version from 1930. And he's one of many people that studied deeply the mystery, the proportions, the elegance of these letters. And in his little book about the Trajan column, he talks about these letters in very militaristic terms, how they marched across the empire and established the Latin alphabet as the supreme alphabet of all Christendom. The empire needed signage, and boy, it was beautiful. And capital letters today still convey a sense of grandeur and permanence and power and stability. And all of that comes from the history behind those letters. And thinking about that history and then returning to Beatrice Warde and her beautiful metaphor of the crystal goblet, I picked this one. But I'm sure you're curious to hear what Type Mom has to say about typography and the patriarchy. Oh, it's Trajan's column. This war monument is why capital letters convey power and authority. Trajan's column is 10 stories high. At the very, very bottom are these letters, which inspired many beautiful typefaces across history. For centuries, designers have traveled to Rome to see and draw and touch Trajan's column. Recently, I went to Rome to see Trajan's column myself. Today, you can't touch the column, but seeing this giant monument made me feel the connection between power and capital letters. The Roman Empire spread these carved letters across Europe, showing dominance. Writing in all caps suggests power and strength. Lowercase brings it down a notch. Typography is power. Use it wisely. Mom jokes. Okay. All right, so chapter 2, learning to read and write. Am I still on?
No, but
Okay.
There you are.
I'm back. She's back. Learning to read and write. So when I went to art school in the early 80s in New York City at the Cooper Union, there were very few books about graphic design to read, and books like this one struck me as a barrier. They weren't very inspiring or inviting for me to enter the field of graphic design. And I was reading other books outside of class. These are all books I read in college that still have a special shelf in my office at home. And these were books about writing and knowledge and power and the body. And in the classroom, my teachers explained to me that design is problem solving. And as a young art student, I found this very, very exciting, very interesting, certainly something I had never heard before. And in New York City, there were great examples of this, like Massimo Vignelli's subway signage, which turned chaos into order. But I was also always curious. Well, maybe.
We have backup mics.
All right. Wow, she's
There
good.
we go. Try that
All
one.
right. Hello. Hello.
Oh, hang on. There we go. Let's switch that. Oh no. Oh, that one's on now. Yeah, we're good.
Hi. Okay. Think of it as suspense, because you've been looking at that question and you're wondering, what does problem solving leave out? That's what I wondered as a student. And on the streets of New York, a young artist named Jenny Holzer was posting posters like this that were cheaply printed in Times New Roman, all caps, italic, at a corner offset shop. And she was using typography to speak her own voice and to interrogate and subvert power using the language of power, and using typography in its most formal and ponderous mode, like these bronze plaques that you see on buildings. She was using typography not to solve problems, but to stir up our consciousness. And that was really inspiring to me. The idea that writing is technology and technology is power. And books like these that I read in college were about how typography makes space into a physical thing. And I thought, I want to do that. That seems super interesting. And I thought, I want to write with type and create texts that take ideas from philosophy and critical theory and apply them really directly to graphic design in a way that graphic designers will understand. And I fell in love with that. I also fell in love with Abbott Miller, who went to school with me. And we created a methodology that we called design writing research, where design was our subject, but also the tool through which we would create our stuff. And research was like the way to get there, right? And that's libraries and collections, like what you have here. And I went on to write many books myself and edit books, all of which ask that question, what does problem solving leave out? And this is one from Thinking with Type. It's my lead soldier quote. It's the one that comes up on the internet if you look for Ellen Lupton quotes. I'm sure you're curious to hear what Type Mom has to say about spacing. Now, Type Mom never read any French theory. She's just very straightforward. She just wants you to get it and love it. Oh no, we have to talk about letter spacing. Do you like it loose or do you like it tight? Positive letter spacing is airy and classical. Negative spacing is funky and intense. Sometimes it's nice to keep a little distance, but let's snuggle up close when tight feels right. Really doesn't like being in movies, but he's a good sport. Okay, the candy shop of history. So when I discovered that I could design my own texts, that was like a revelation. It was like a religious moment. I was an art student. I never thought of myself as a writer, but when I encountered that typography was this medium where you could turn words into things that were visual, I was like, nobody ever thought of that, right? Of course, I would soon learn, as young people do, that many people had already discovered that. And I want to tell you a few stories about some of those people and typography. So one of them is the great American poet Walt Whitman, who considered himself the working man's poet. You know, he was not a romantic. He wasn't a lord like Lord Byron. You know, he had this very American sensibility about being a worker. And the place he worked was a print shop. And it was as a printer that he even got the idea to be a poet. And that's the story that I think is really interesting, is that for many of us, typography comes first. Typography is the lure into the world of type. And Walt Whitman liked to sit in the print shop when his own poems were being printed and write notes on the proofs and then have the printer reset the type. You can imagine how annoying this is. This is like the client looking over your shoulder. But the guy's Walt Whitman, okay? He got away with it. And typography was his entry point, not his exit, not the final touch. It was his way in to writing. This beautiful hand-lettered title page by Walt Whitman is based on medical drawings of sperm cells. I'll bring you in closer. And many of his poems are very sexy, about having sex with women, with men, and with himself, a very queer poet with a very rich vocabulary for talking about jism and other things. And here he does this beautiful lettering with the sperms, you know, inseminating the word. I love that. William Wells Brown was born as an enslaved man in the United States, and it was not uncommon for enslaved people to be hired out by their owners to work in industry, including in print shops. And William Wells Brown learned to read by learning to set type in a print shop in St. Louis. So typography was really his entrance to being a writer. And he went on to become a free man and a prominent abolitionist, feminist, novelist, and a historian. And his knowledge of the craft of typography enabled him to control the printing process, to understand how to publish his work, how to create stereotypes so that he could publish his work in Dublin, for example, where one edition was printed from his own stereotypes. And Machado de Assis became one of Brazil's most famous novelists. He was the grandson of slaves, and he worked for a typesetter before becoming a writer. And that knowledge and access to printing and type drove his work. And this amazing novel, which has been translated into a beautiful new English translation, is really funny. It's very self-conscious. It comments on the process of writing. There's one chapter that's written entirely in punctuation. And so again, that knowledge of type brought him into the world of literature. But wait, these are all named authors, right? Famous authors in the languages that they represent. Writing with type isn't just being a named author. Writing with type is also the work that graphic designers do in the background, the shaping, the hosting, the polishing of the glass, right? We are goblets and ghosts, right? We're in the background. And so I want to tell you a story about another designer and editor, Gretel Adorno, who was the wife of Theodor Adorno, one of the founders of the Frankfurt School and critical theory. She ran the publishing activities of the Frankfurt School. She transcribed and edited her husband's books, and he kindly referred to her as his precious helper. At the end of World War II, the Frankfurt School was run in exile in Los Angeles, and they stopped publishing formally printed books and changed to a new medium, the medium of mimeograph. And this was cheaper. It could be done locally. The pages were completely typed, edited, set up by Gretel Adorno, so you didn't need a designer, right? She did the design, this DIY design. This is a woman holding up a mimeograph stencil, right? So mimeograph was a form of printing that women were associated with the creation of it, the formatting. And there's a beautiful quote by Theodor Adorno talking about how the mimeograph book at this moment in history, 1944, represented the way books should be at a moment when the world had been shattered. That books shouldn't look pretty anymore. They shouldn't be commodities. They shouldn't be cute things you buy in a bookshop. They should look like this. Unobtrusive was his word. So this is typography as rejection of war. And this is flush left typography. And Robin Kinross wrote an incredible article about the origin of flush left typography, where he argues that it was the mimeographed books of the Frankfurt School that really provided the model for setting text flush left. And this from 1946 is one of the first texts set flush left. The Bauhaus did not set text flush left. This is a new phenomenon. And it comes from that mimeograph world, that unobtrusive typography, right, that was celebrated out of necessity by the Frankfurt School, and then becomes a model for creating text that is less warlike, less authoritative, less restrictive, less order imposed on chaos. I'm sure you want to hear, or maybe you're tired of her by now, what Type Mom has to say about unobtrusive typography. She likes it. Oh, too many signals. Type doesn't have to be underlined, colored, and bold. Have fun using caps, bold, color, italic, underlines, drop shadows, and more. But if you make everything stand out, nothing really does. Please, don't make your tummy hurt. Thank you, Type Mom. Okay, finally I want to tell you about the new edition of Thinking with Type. We're at chapter 4. And this is the 2010 edition. And you might be wondering, why? Why make a new edition of a book? Well, typography has changed, right? There's a lot of new fonts, a lot of new technologies, new ways that we do type. And also, I'd like to say new values for type and new ways to talk about type that are more inclusive. So there's lots of nerdy stuff in the new edition, like optical sizes, which have become so much more than just adjusting type so it looks good when it's big or little. It's really become an experimental feature of fonts, much more visually out there than a mere optical adjustment. Or unit-width fonts, which are especially useful in interface design because they don't change size when you change the weight. Or variable fonts, which is a whole font format that didn't exist in 2010. And there's also a lot more design stuff in the book. I found that a lot of young people who acquire Thinking with Type, it's like their first design book. And I wanted the book to have more guidance for doing graphic design, more principles of layout and alignment, gestalt grouping, the sort of one-stop shopping for kind of a basic introduction to graphic design. I've always wanted this book to be a tool and something that would be really useful to its readers. But the book is also philosophical, and it has essays and critical thinking and examples from history of graphic design. And that's always been really cool. I want to tell you a little bit about a brand new theory of typography that Type Mom helped me with. And when I share this theory with my students, it's like a light bulb goes on. On or off? I think they're supposed to go on. So let me show you the ice cream theory of typography. We start with a vessel, right, which is the page, the background, the format, the container, the goblet, if you were. And then we have text, right? And text should be very digestible, a little bit bland. It should feel good. It shouldn't bother you. But nobody wants to eat 3 scoops of Adobe Garamond. Therefore, we add headlines. And headlines are intense and memorable and a little bit heavy, right? And they let you get all the way through that whole ice cream sundae. And then there's the part that people forget. And this is the part when I tell my students about this part of the ice cream sundae, they're like, yes. And they'll often remind me, this part is the crunchy bits. And the crunchy bits are the little details, the page numbers and footnotes and the small caps and the way you treat a caption. And those details are what make the typography or the sundae complete, right? You need the crushed peanuts and
battery. We have fresh batteries in this one. Third time lucky.
I love a fresh battery, thank you. And then there's the cherry on top, which might be that one illustrated, unique, a logo or a customized headline that appears only once. So that's the ice cream theory of typography, and it all comes together in one glorious layered bowl of wonderfulness, and we can see it applied to type. And again, the crunchy bits, that's what makes it, right? We think it's the headline, but it's actually the sprinkles and the crushed peanuts and the toasted coconut that really brings your typography together. So if there's one thing you remember tonight, let it be the crunchy bits. Okay, and so the other thing new in Thinking with Type is new values and making the book more inclusive, and a little less judgy. So this is a spread from the 2010 edition about the anatomy of typefaces. And it's very sexy, and I like it. But now it looks more like this. And so it gives a bigger picture of what typography is. I like to say that the native language of thinking with type is English, and the native alphabet is Latin, but that it speaks to a bigger world, a vast world of typographic practice. Another thing that I changed and gave a lot of thought to was the idea of type crimes, which appear in the old edition as these kind of humorous scoldings, because type mom will yell at you when you make mistakes. And it's meant to be funny and playful and a little bit self-deprecating to myself and to all of us for thinking typography is so important. But I decided to take that out and just have these icons instead, because I felt like the idea of crime is actually really serious, right? Whether you're a victim of crime or a victim of the criminal justice system in overdrive, didn't seem like something to joke about, so I didn't. And I think it looks really nice and friendly and clear, which is what it's supposed to be. Okay, so my last story is about language, and it's about widows and the way we talk about typography. The word widow was introduced around 1904 in English to describe a short line of text at the end of a paragraph. And we also talk about orphans as a line stranded at the top of a new page or a column. And this language is kind of exclusionary and negative. And I had the pleasure to meet Britta Lindvall-Lightman, who together with her collaborator Alexandra Falagora has researched these terms and sought ways to activate them and reform them. So this is from her PhD thesis. And she talks about how in Sweden, the word Hörungar, or the German word Herrenkind, which is used for widows and orphans in those languages, translates as bastard or child of a whore. So this is very negative language for what is simply a short line of type at the end of a paragraph. And in their experimental work, they've done these beautiful things where they activate those short lines, calling them besungen, or cheeky young rascals, as an homage to unmarried mothers and their children. And so instead of hiding the short lines, they actually use them to guide the reading, or to become a new kind of paragraph indent, right? Such beautiful experimental work. But they didn't stop at the experiments. They also participated in a movement in Sweden to reform the language that proofreaders, who are very important people, use to talk about errors. And so now the word simply means single line. Just describes the problem. And so this is a spread from Thinking with Type, showing their experimental work and talking about this language and how to speak differently about type. So the new book has more depth, more fonts, more voices. It's less judgy. And I have to let Type Mom have the last word, and this is it. She's going to tell you what she thinks about widows. Oh, it's a widow. A paragraph ending in a single word looks choppy and awkward. You can fix it by adjusting the tracking. Bad break, good break. Bad break, good break. Designers often call these stranded words widows. Using the word widow as an insult is demeaning to women. Honor the widows in your life. Each one is a beautiful survivor, not a problem to be fixed. And just call those awkward lines bad breaks. Thank you, Becky and the St. Bride Foundation for this beautiful opportunity. That's the right way. All right, thank you.
So hopefully you can hear me in the room. If it goes off, I will still use the microphone so people in Zoom can hear me, and I'll just have to shout louder. Ellen, thank you so much. That was just so brilliant. There's been so many fantastic comments on Zoom. There's so much love in the room, I'm sure, about how you see the world, how you communicate so clearly and just so brilliantly. It's just been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Anyone on Zoom, if you would like to ask a question, please just put them in the chat and we will come to you in a little while. Does anyone in the room have a question for Ellen? Or shall I go to Zoom because I have a question on there and leave you to think? I'll do that because I know there's definitely one question on Zoom currently. So,
the first question is
the first question. Yeah. So this is from, I'm really sorry if the pronunciation is terrible. Joel has a question, which is, which Western designers working today do you recommend? Very specific question.
Oh my. I feel like I'm on the spot. Like typeface designers or graphic designers?
It didn't specify, so maybe one or two of each. It's like picking between your favorite books or children or ice cream toppings, I feel like.
Well, I love Paula Scher, who I admire for her incredible career of ever-changing typography. I love the work of many of my students, like Shivani Parasnis, who does typography for Spotify. She's not technically a Western designer, she's Indian, but working in an American company in New York City. There's so many, there are many great designers featured in my new book. I don't know why I can't remember their names. I'm a little bit, on the spot there.
So you're saying, Ellen, we need to go and buy your book to find out who inspires you?
Just I would never say that.
No.
Just email me, I'll give you a list.
I can say it. It's okay if we say it. I have to say there's just been so much love for Type Mom, especially on Zoom. And everyone
Type Mom loves you. All of you.
We all love Type Mom. And someone said that you communicate, you're clear and friendly. It's like you're talking about typography is clear and friendly, and that's how you are as well. So it's like you're describing yourself, which I think is very apt. So this is a question I hate getting asked. It's like, what's your favorite book? Do you have a favorite typeface?
Well,
today's favorite typeface, maybe.
Well, today in my talk, I used New Rail Alphabet by Margaret Calvert, who's has some beautiful work in the archive here. I have always loved the typeface Scala by Martin Mayor. I don't really like Helvetica, but I respect it. You know, it's like a priest or something in your community. Those are a few.
Absolutely. So we've got loads of questions coming. So from Alison, she asks, I'm sorry, I'm assuming it's a she, that's really bad of me. I was wondering how you started thinking in detail about type. I know it can sometimes be hard for me to understand the terminology as a designer. Do you need me to read that again, or?
No, how did I start thinking in detail about type? Well, as a student, you know, it's like it was such a mystery. And when I was a student so many centuries ago, when Gutenberg was, you know, inventing the wine press, it was like nobody knew anything about type. It was scary. It was like intimidating. And so you kind of had to like get into it and try to figure it out. And I felt like the books that we had to read about type were very technical, and I wanted to understand type in a more philosophical way, so I turned to other writers who were outside of the design field to kind of illuminate the why of typography. And so in my work as a writer and a curator, I always wanted to ask the question, why? So not just, here's the thing, do it, or here's the thing, love it, eat it, right, clear your plate, but like, why? Why is it good? And so that asking why is really important to me, and I guess that's more interesting than the detail.
Absolutely. There's loads of support online again for adopting bad breaks. So thank you for that.
Or short lines.
Or short lines, yes, absolutely. I'm just, bear with me while I scroll through.
And these people might be getting more courageous now.
Yes,
to ask a question.
I will just get to the bit online, and then I will come to the room so that everyone feels like they're being listened to. So Judy has asked, a while back you had some great video games shooting at type to make it italic, which I always got a laugh from my students, especially during my 8 a.m. classes. Do you still have those?
Yeah, so these videos still exist on my computer, but I did them in Flash, which that no longer exists. So no, I actually do have some videos of them playing.
Good to know.
So you would shoot your gun. It was very warlike. You would shoot the bad quotes.
Oh, excellent.
And save the curly quotes.
Yeah.
So you had to be very distinguishing between good and evil.
Good to know. I'm going to go for my last question online and then come back to the room. Do you have any tips for students looking to experiment more with typography in their work? Big question.
I guess I was talking with Elliot J. Stocks earlier, and we talked about the word intention and how important the word intention is in design. And I feel that when you set an intention around something you want to say or communicate or experience, that makes experimenting a lot easier. And I think experimenting, just like adding a bunch of stuff to the pot, is usually not very palatable. So Type Mom would say, choose a sweet and a sour, right? Like, have an intention behind what it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
And that can make experimenting a little bit less like just fucking around, sorry, but just, Type Mom is going to be mad at me for that. But just, I think often when I see, experimental work, I'm like, yeah, but like, why? And when there's an intention, then we have a why. I just love the why.
Absolutely. I personally don't mind a little bit of swearing. I think it's a sign of intelligence, apparently. So I know this gentleman here had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Does it work?
Yes.
Okay. I really like the way you're dealing with the nomenclature that you did, changing orphan to bad line. And if we reverse that, in other words, do you think it would instead? Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. In addition,
He's nervous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in addition to questioning those kind of names, do you think it would also be worth questioning our perception of a bad line, i.e., why is it a bad line? If there's just one word at the end, so what? So we just think that's really.
I thought about that.
I'm sure you must have done. You must have done, and I'm just thinking, since I work as magazine designers, and the editor, there's one word at the end, there's one word in the next line, and I think, yeah, so no one is going to die. I mean,
I will.
And I think that this is just what history told us, and what we've been told at school, and questioning one thing and often, and I think we should also question our own viewing habits. To some extent, no one is going to die if there's one word in the end. That's not bad. We just think it's bad.
But if we go down that route, then we're lost, right? Because I thought about that. Like, why judge anything? Why have any in my book, like, why have any X's? You know, shouldn't we just permit everything? And it's like, well, no, typography is judgment. It is about deciding, and deciding to make things good and beautiful. And I see you raising your eyebrows. So why are the short lines ugly? Because it's a big gap. And if we want our type to have a kind of shape and texture and identity as a column, the gap is kind of a break. Do most people care? Not at all. Do we care? Many of us do. And I will literally rewrite a paragraph to not have a short line because I can, because I'm powerful and have that ability. I would never change the tracking on my own text. I would just get rid of an extra word, you know. But I think the question that you ask is a very excellent one because it gets at the idea, should we have any rules at all? Should it just, you know, just
Maybe
all
just
be...
conventions and not rules.
That what?
Maybe just conventions and not rules. Not saying something is
Yeah,
bad.
I mean, it's etiquette. You know, should you say thank you? Type mom says yes, you should say thank you.
Absolutely.
But will anybody die if you don't? No.
I think the microphone may die again, but we'll go with it.
I have about 20 batteries in my briefcase.
At the back of the room, it'll be fine.
Okay. Yes, my question, and I'm a consumer of typography rather than a practitioner in it. You showed corrected proof of Walt Whitman.
Yes.
And I didn't know what the aim was of the corrections, because there were lots of notes.
Well,
and it didn't look a very pleasing page to me. And
so for Walt Whitman, and for many writers, for myself too, it isn't just about wanting to see how pretty the type looks on the page. It's that the moment of the proof objectifies the text. It removes it from you, and you're able to see the errors or the things you want to change. Balzac was also someone that obsessively changed his proofs. And it wasn't about making the printed page look better. It was that being able to see the text on a page made him realize what he wanted to change. So if you've ever had the experience of you're working in InDesign and you create a PDF and look at the PDF on the screen, and that's when you see the thing you want to change. That's the phenomenon that is universal in graphic design, right? That's why we have proofs, right? It's so that you can fix things that are wrong. And for Walt Whitman, he wanted to not just fix typos, he wanted to rewrite the poem. So Leaves of Grass, which is one of his most famous books, 6 or 7 editions over the course of his life, and he kept rewriting the poems. And he would look at the printed version and change it to something different. So I hope that helps you. It isn't just about making it pretty, it's about the language itself. When it's embodied, when it's there on the page as a reader will see it, the writer's like, I have to fix it, I have to change it.
Yeah, questions? I'll go there and there. Sorry, it's not working again. Hopefully it will now. There we go.
Hi. In the new edition of Thinking of Type, you show working with different languages, and I was just wondering if you worked with international typographers when conducting your research, and if so, which designers stick out to you the most?
Yes, I worked with international typographers to create typographic diagrams and sort of introductions to typography in Arabic, Korean, Japanese, Chinese, and Indic scripts. And I worked with native speakers and typographic experts in those scripts to produce that content so that it would be correct and authentic. Does that answer your question? Oh, well, they're all amazing. So Casper Lam and Lejun Park did the essay on Chinese. Shiva Nala Perumal did the work on Indic scripts. And he's an amazing typeface designer as well as an incredible graphic designer. Wael Morkos did the material on Arabic typography. And he's also a great type designer and graphic designer. So amazing people with incredible intelligence about type, yeah.
Thank you. I think we had one over here. You pass the mic down.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the talk. It was really amazing. I think you already touched a bit on it, but I was wondering, like, if we look towards the future, like, which developments in type are you kind of most excited about, or something? That's really cool.
The future. I'm excited that more and more people do typography every day. You know, that we have more tools like Google Fonts and Canva, and tools that lots of people that didn't used to work with type are now able to do so. And I've watched that over the course of my career. And every time, you know, when secretaries got Times New Roman, graphic designers thought the world would end. You know, this was it. How dare they, these secretaries, make choices about fonts? But it didn't end, and I think having more people be interested in type and use type, writing with type, is a good thing, and I'm excited about that.
I'm just going to go back to our online community, and there's so many questions. I'm not sure we're going to get through everyone, but we will do our best if Ellen is happy to answer a few more. Sorry, I'm just getting to the, God, there's too many to scroll from, it's brilliant. So Brockett has asked, in what ways did the design and writing of thinking with type propel each other?
Well, you will find not a single short line. Not one. It's like when you're writing in InDesign, as I do, it's like you're constantly seeing what the text looks like, and you're able to see, oh, that paragraph looks too long, so I'm going to make it shorter. That's usually the case. Like almost everything ever written in the history of the world could be shorter, and everybody would like it better. And so see, you know, if you write something in a Google Doc, it goes on and on and on and on. And the minute you put it in type, you see the thing is just too long, so you make it shorter. So all of it, yeah.
Brilliant. And we've had a question from Alex.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Alex. Your book on designing for the senses is an inspirationally inclusive text that reads like poetry in places. If you could share one insight from the book, what would it be from a disabled design educator?
So Alex is referring to a book about design for the senses that I did, which is called Design Beyond Vision. And it made me rewrite the epigram at the front of Thinking with Type, which in the old edition says, type is language made visible, something like that. Except that type isn't always visible. So if you're blind, type is something you hear or touch. And it's still type, it's still formatted, it's still conveying the written word. So that book about the senses was very important and eye-opening, so to speak, for me, to think about design isn't just what we see. And inclusive design has more senses than that.
Absolutely.
And it's very poetic.
Any more questions in the room? Yes, I'll come down to you two.
Ellen, I've seen a few of your Type Mum videos online,
I'm
sorry. You missed an important one for me, which was one on grids. Any reason why that wasn't in today's
Why didn't
presentation?
show it tonight?
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen it. Sorry.
There are so many Type Mom videos. I had to choose them, and I had to find some arbitrary way to link them to the content of the talk. So grids just didn't come up, but that's a good one, so you can find that on Instagram.
Thank you.
Do you think that typography is in graphic design a discipline that has more kind of rules than other disciplines? And if yes, do you think that this is the kind of reason why it feels like at the moment there's a lot of more experimental things against the rules, kind of the cake theory going on?
I think graphic design and typography is part of that. It does have a lot of rules because it has to work. And most of the time, we just want to get the content, and we want to find our gate at Heathrow, and we don't want it to be like a big experience. But there's also a place for the goblet to crack and to become more visible and clouded for our pleasure. But the 99.999% of graphic design is just doing its job. And that's cool. I respect that and honor that work and those workers and that function. And then there's a time for dessert, right? For that special something that is experimental design, and I love that too. Beautiful question, thank you.
Any more questions in the room? Oh gosh, loads. We might not get to everyone, but I'll try.
I know, because they all have to pee, like I.
Yes.
Hi, I have a question about ethics. And so when you talked about your new edition, about this idea of new values being included in it, and I was just curious about this idea that, especially since the first edition of the book, there's been this, and I guess to contextualize this, I'm writing a PhD on graphic design and disinformation. And one of the phenomena that I've noticed is sort of that we think a lot about designers' intentions with things, and then in the phenomena of disinformation, you have this tension where you have these really beautiful typefaces that are then used for nefarious content. And so I was interested in sort of how you might think about how do we kind of reconcile this within design? Is that, we design these beautiful typefaces that get used kind of for things that maybe we don't want them used for, and kind of how typography and typographic practice might be included into other writing that has already existed on sort of ethics of design.
That's a really hard question. I'm not sure I have an answer for you. I'm really glad you're doing this research. I think it's super important. I think, the misuse of language, to spread misinformation probably isn't usually happening at the level of the font, but more at the level of the language. But that often the authoritative quality of it, right, from Trajan's column to Helvetica, there's this sense of authority, and people obey authority and respect authority and think it's true. And I guess that's where the ethics comes in, is that authority being abused. So it's a beautiful question, thank you.
Okay, we're time for one more question. One more. Question. So over to you.
That's a lot of pressure. My question is, you talked a bit about widows and orphans, and I wondered if there were some other examples where we frame typography with overly negative or loaded or patriarchal terms that you could talk about?
Well, there's a lot of things like the expression non-Latin typography, which presumes Latin as the norm. When we talk about reverse stress, right, we assume that all typography has a certain stress because that is the norm in Latin-based typography. But if you look at Indic scripts, they have a horizontal stress. So it's subtle stuff, but these terms that assume what is the norm and what is normative are all forms of exclusionary language. And as people that are in the language business, we can, exercise language justice in our work.
I feel like that's a very powerful moment to end on. I cannot thank you enough, Ellen. I feel like we could ask you questions all night and never get bored, but I realise you probably could do with a little bit of a break. Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful evening. I know everyone online has been sending their absolute love and thanks. Everyone in the room.
There'll be trolls out there too.
Yeah, but we can get over them. It's fine. We're in a lovely, inclusive, brilliant room full of brilliant people. Thank you all so much for joining us online, in person. A huge round of applause for Ellen. Thank you.